2 of the baseline of the yard, and we're gonna get started. Okay, so we're gonna start off where we left off in the front yard and dive into the back. Over here I had some morning glories, and let me rewind a little bit. I said we had cut down a bunch of trees. There was one large pine. Over here is a stump of another large pine. And this entire area back here was trees all the way down up to where the grass is. So we did a lot of tree cutting this about a year ago. So when I say that we have a baseline, it is actually not a true baseline because I've been working back here for about a year. In the corner, I planted some dahlias and a limelight hydrangea, and so the dahlias, all of them that you're gonna see, they look terrible because the stakes I have for them are definitely not big enough. And then over here, I threw in some elephant ears. It'll go between the two gates. Tropical is not my gardening style, but we spent a lot of time in Colombia, Panama, and some of those places when we were active duty, and so I wanted to make sure that I had a little bit of something that represented that. And then coming around, I have the Queen Elizabeth rose, and I picked that one because it's got the name Elizabeth, and that is my name. And then I have some few other dahlias, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and pull all of them up because I don't like where I planted them, and they definitely could probably use support from one another. Coming on this side, I've got a bunch of rocks that will be moved, old hoses that I've pulled up for irrigation that's no longer useful, and then I'm gonna have to turn all of this into some type of a shade, type of a border, because this is the north side and it's not going to get any sun. And all of this dirt between a garden area, the other part will be lined as a path for driving the lawnmower back and forth. So late last winter and all through the spring, I had dug all of this up. We tilled all of the area over here and put down compost, manure, and then we laid cardboard to try to keep all of the weeds from growing up. But as you can see, that cardboard didn't stop anything. I think perhaps it would have worked better if I might have thrown some mulch down on top of the cardboard instead of leaving it exposed to the rain. It just kind of started to decompose. A lot of the things that you see in here in terms of flowers were already here, other than the dahlias. The petunias that have popped up all over the place, those are self-seeded. I think that they might have gotten the seeds kicked up when we tilled this area. Further in, it starts sloping, and from all of the regrowth of tree stumps and weeds and clover, you can't really see, but it's definitely a sloping area. And so one of the things that we're going to have to work on is erosion control, because when the rains come, everything just washes down this hill and goes out, and there's kind of a gully over there, and then it runs down into the lake below. So this icky thing behind me was a sunflower. It looked really great when it first started blooming. It was big, it was beautiful. I got a picture. I'll see if I'm smart enough to get it put onto the video. But as soon as it started getting the seeds, it started quickly dying. So in this awful mess, I actually planted 3 Rose of Sharon's. There's one right here. There's another one over here. And then there's a third one down there. And unfortunately, something has gotten at all of them. It's especially gotten at this one. All my leaves are just on my Rose of Sharon, my hydrangeas, my evergreens. Something is just really getting to them. Hopefully this is going to pull out of whatever funk it's in, because it was really a pretty plant when it was blooming. This tree here was supposed to be the focal point of the garden. In the end, all of this is going to be in an English cottage garden style. But this, I had made a special trip to Colorado to get 3 trees. This was the one I was most after. It's a Louisa weeping crabapple, and it did not fare well. And I think I'll do another video on it to go more in depth on some of the issues that I've had with her. More of the problems that I'm having in the garden, you can see that whatever junk this is just really putting a whammy on my plants. I wish I knew what the problem was. Okay, so down here I got a Rambling Rose from David Austin Roses, and I have it in a container because one of the prior owners had children and they had a swing set with sand, and for whatever reason this ground that this pot is sitting on is just covered in sand. So I put the rose into the pot, but I don't know if you can see the leaves on the end there. They're not looking great. I don't know if the pot is the problem, and if it is, I'm going to have to get in there and try to remove some of the sand and fix some of those soil issues. I did feed the rose, but it doesn't seem to be quite content still. Next to the rose, I put a camellia. I think it's a Diana something or other, and that's been in the ground for about a year, and it didn't bloom last year, but it has put on a lot of growth, so I'm hoping that that's going to put on a real nice show. And then on the other side over here, I have a beautyberry bush that was here when we got here, but it was further up the hill. So after the trees got cut, I went ahead and moved this into a different location because I like it, but I don't want it to be in the cottage garden. Okay. When I went to Colorado to get my tree, I said I got 3 of them. The other one is over here, the little skinny little guy. That one is a purple type crabapple, and I got that to be for my son and have it planted in the garden. So I'm standing next to the beautyberry bush, and I'm trying to see if I can show how much the yard is sloping. It's quite a bit. In this area over here on the edge of this flower bed, we're going to put some steps in that come down into this part of the yard. Alright, I'm back at the top of the hill. There's the beautyberry bush down there at the bottom. And this garden we worked on all through the spring until I suppose midsummer. Everything in here is newly planted aside from the gardenias, which are that hedge in the back. This pole here with all the pretty morning glories has a birdhouse on top that you can't see, and it has 2 railroad lanterns that you can't see. And while I like the morning glories, I think that I will not put them in that area next year because they really just took over everything. But the hummingbirds seem to like it, so I'm probably going to find a new place to put those. And just get a slow pan on what I have. As you can tell, I did some things right and some things not so good. And all of this is going to get cleaned up. I just wasn't sure how I wanted to go about finishing it off because I don't like the rock. It's pretty and all, but whatever this grass is a real pain in the neck because it just sends out runners and it grows in between all of these cracks between the placement of the rocks, and so I need some kind of a border that does better at keeping all this grass out of here. So I'm just going to walk along here. I'm heading down towards the lake. And we planted up the back side of the garden that I was just showing you. There's the back of the house. All right, behind me here, this is my little place that I like to sit and contemplate what to do in the yard and have a couple of drinks because I think better such ways. Hanging baskets, some type of begonia that I put in there, and those were pretty good this year, and I think we'll have to repeat that for next year. Also, one of the issues we've had within this area, the fire pit, it doesn't work very well because the oxygen can't get in there. I think is probably the biggest problem. When it was built, all of the seams were kind of sealed up, and so you kind of have to fight to keep the fires going. I want to keep some form of a fire pit because we get so much leaves, branches, and those kinds of things that we need to burn some of that off every once in a while. And the other problem I had here is this area was where the swing set for the kids with the prior owners was kept, and that owner put a ton of tire mulch down, and that stuff, in my opinion, is not good. We still can't get all of the tire mulch out of here. Let's see if I can find some. Here's a pile of it. We've rented two roll-offs for all of the trees that we moved in this area and filled up the two roll-offs, and easily a third of that roll-off was tire mulch from this area. It's just so awful. And then anything that we rake up in here has to be thrown away. We can't burn it because there's so many little remaining pieces of tire mulch. I think eventually I want to get pavers for this so that way I can blow the leaves out. We don't have mud under our feet when the ground is wet, and then that way dead leaves, dead branches aren't sitting around where we want to be doing our fires at. Moving around this direction, this is the back side of the garden that we worked on this summer, and then all of this is on a pretty steep slope, and we planted it up with ferns, hosta, heuchera, and then I threw in a few hydrangea, and they're kind of struggling with that leaf issue, whatever that might be. More of the trees we cut down. All of these shrubby looking plants growing all over the place are suckers that have sprouted out from all the trees that were removed, and you can see I've got them all over the place. Every one of those was a tree. These plants right here are azaleas that I removed from the back of the house that were growing up over the basement window. These only flower once a year, but they're free, and I thought I'd just throw them up over here so that anybody walking down to the lake on the outside of the fence has something nice to look at, give a little bit of a privacy hedge. Here's where our firewood is normally kept. We just recently gave a bunch away, so I'm gonna restack some of that and then put all the pine cones in that Gorilla box so that we have some tinder or kindling for our fires. This summer I added the hosta around the pine tree, and I think they're doing mostly okay, but the pine tree rains down needles, pine cones. The squirrels eat at the pine cones, pick them all apart. It's all over the place. All of this new lighter orange gold type pieces on the ground are all broken up pine cones. The squirrels are getting nice and fat right now, I think. Down over here, I planted 2 really pretty oak leaf hydrangeas, and I think this variety was called Jack Frost, but again, something is getting at my plants. I don't like that. I think this area I'm probably going to make into something that resembles our time that we spent in Korea. And then just panning around, last year at this time you could not see the water from the house. You actually had to come way down here to see any kind of water. So a lot of trees were pulled out of here. And even with all those other trees gone, there's still quite a bit of shade. We're going to have to do some terrace gardening, I think, and then kind of slow down some of this erosion. Also need to establish a path, and there's kind of one that you can't really see, but a place that we found to be able to get the lawnmower down out the fence so that I can take care of cleaning up and maintenance on the area on the other side of the fence over by the lake. And that is it for this section down here. You probably can't tell, but there's a steep slope kind of going just like that. And I think we're going to put a retaining wall and then get some of those pavers to get all this taken care of. Okay, so we were just walking around over in that area. Here's my little drinky thinky spot. And then over here on this side, that's the path that we use to get back and forth to the lake. It's got a couple of steps going in it, but this area is a definite problem in the rain. All of this washes down. I keep having to shovel mud out of the, or dried up dirt, out of the way to get the gate to close. So we're going to have to come up with a plan for this to keep everything from washing away. And then over here, you can see how wooded that is. We have not started in on that side yet as far as clearing. Clearing has to be done before anything else happens. So I went through, and you'll see some markings, and we'll talk about that area in the next video. Right, just gonna finish this side up. The back of the house, this was loaded up, and there's still quite a few that need to come out of here, but there's a ton of azaleas. They bloom once a year. Some other shrubby evergreens that I pulled out that I'm not sure what to do with yet. And then this area is where our septic system is. So we're gonna have to figure out how to plant around that. Right now, one of our problems is it goes out into the yard, and the lawnmower, especially that white, whatever it does, popping out. So I wanna get the flower bed to go around those things so we don't have to mess with it while we're mowing. And then behind me is the deck, and it was heavily planted with knockout roses, and the knockout roses grew up almost to the top railing of the deck, and we thinned those out, cut them all the way down to the ground, and they came back. And I think if I decided not to prune them, they would probably flush out again and be full of flowers, but I keep them rather thin because when we cleaned that out, it was a thorny, awful, gross mess. I think in this area we're contemplating putting a swimming pool, and so I'm not really going to do a whole lot with that yet. All right, this is for real the last part of part 2 of our baseline. I'm coming out of our basement right now, and this is a little bit embarrassing to show you because it's an awful mess, but we're slowly trying to get this area nice. Recently we hung up 3 ceiling fans, and those are nice in the summertime when we're sitting out here. I know that this area looks awful. I'm saving cardboard, but I have to keep it dry before I can put it on the ground. I don't have storage, and I wanted to do these videos to show you what our issues are, and I might as well just show you the good, the bad, and the ugly of everything, because that's the whole purpose of my videos. All of this is going to need to find storage. This wooden thing, shelves, were upstairs, and it was so heavy to get it all the way from the top floor all the way down here to the bottom. But it's pretty convenient, and I think we're going to make some doors or curtains or something to hide all of this, because I do use these all the time. And eventually all of this is going to find a home in a shed, and that will find a new home as well. We just have so much stuff, and a lot of it we can't get rid of because we use it, but there's got to be a better solution than what we have right now. Okay, that finally wraps up part 2 of our baseline videos, and we will get started on part 3.